Today's episode of Variant is brought to you by Domain.com. Today on Variant, I count down the 10 best Spider-Man costumes. Welcome to Variant, where we love comics more than I'm still sad I don't have an Xbox One or a PS4. I'm your host, Arris. As a lot of you may know, Spider-Man is one of my favorite superheroes, and being one of my favorite superheroes, I love talking about him whenever I get the chance to. And recently, a countdown of Spidey's 10 best costumes over the years was suggested to me, which I thought was a great idea since Spider-Man has so many cool costumes. So let's see what my 10 favorite are. Before I get into my list, I just want to say Spider-Man's red and blue costume doesn't count on my list because that would be the obvious pick for number 1 since you can't beat a classic, at least in my opinion. With that said, at number 10 is the Spider Armor. Now this costume slash armor hasn't been featured in too many comics, but has quickly become a fan favorite, at least for me. The suit first appeared in Web of Spider-Man issue 100. It was created when the new enforcers attacked New York using high caliber firearms. Spider-Man created a suit called the Spider Armor composed of a pseudo-metallic compound Peter Parker developed at Empire State University. The suit slowed him down and made him less agile, but allowed him to be bulletproof during battles. Most people probably remember this suit from the 90s Spider-Man animated series cartoon, where one of the alternate reality versions of Spider-Man is wearing it. The costume has also appeared in numerous amount of video games, but I do have to say, even though I do think the suit is really cool, a big reason why it's on my list is because of nostalgia. Coming in at number 9 is Future Foundation Spider-Man. After the temporary death of Spidey's good friend Johnny Storm, Spider-Man is recruited by the surviving members of the Fantastic Four to join their new team, FF aka Future Foundation. Right before the team's first mission together, Spider-Man grabs an old Fantastic Four costume out of his closet, which I could only assume is the same one left from the time he was the Amazing Bagman, and declares himself ready to roll. When the Future Foundation tells him that using an old costume is disrespectful to Johnny's legacy, Spidey is forced to suit up in one of the group's new black and white get-ups. Spider-Man initially hates the costume, thinking it makes him look like one of his villains, Anti-Venom, but then he eventually goes with it. I just really like the black and white color scheme of this costume, and besides the color scheme, I like the black patterns on the side and the huge spider on his chest. I just think it was a good change up for Spider-Man, plus when the whole team's together, they look awesome. Spider-Man continued to wear this costume in a handful of Amazing Spider-Man issues, and for the first 12 issues of the Future Foundation series, until Johnny's return in Fantastic Four issue 600. Next on my list is the second version of the Superior Spider-Man costume. Not only was I a fan of the Superior Spider-Man title, but I was also a fan of his costume. I'm pretty much a sucker for a black and red color scheme, especially when it comes to Spider-Man, as you may notice as this list continues. Not only does the suit look cool, but its functionality is awesome. As most of you may or may not know, the Superior Spider-Man was Otto Octavius' mind inside Peter Parker's body. So since Doc Ock was Spider-Man, of course that came along with new toys and gadgets for his costume. Two of my favorite gadgets would be the Spider Arms, which are 4 mechanical arms used for combat. They are seemingly based off the Spider Arms from the Iron Spider armor or Doc Ock's own arms. And second would be the talons carried over from the previous attire, being retractable but slightly larger and still possessing Nano Spider injection ports, which have been modified to detonate, causing both paralysis and great pain. Basically, this is one BA costume. At number 7 is Scarlet Spider Kane. For those of you who don't know, Kane was the first failed yet still successful attempt of a spider clone created by the Jackal. I say failed because due to a flawed cloning process, Kane was deformed and mentally unstable, but still successful because later on his mutation was cured and he took up the Scarlet Spider mantle. Putting it plain and simple, Kane is one BA character, and so is his costume. I like how they decided to give him red eyes, which was a nice change up. It's also cool how his costume is solid colors and has no webbing on it, which is somewhat of a change up when you're talking about a Spidey costume. Also, what's a really minor but still a cool little touch I think, is how he has a black spider emblem on his chest and a red spider emblem on his back. It's a subtle change, but it's the little things in life, you know? Coming in at number 6 is the Ben Reilly Spider-Man costume. Ben Reilly was the second and most successful clone of Spider-Man, who was also created by the Jackal. He was originally the first Scarlet Spider, but later replaced Peter Parker for a time as Spider-Man in the mid-90s. So of course, since it was a new person under the mask, we had to get a new costume. The suit made its debut in Sensational Spider-Man issue 0. What I like about the costume is how it updates the classic red and blue concept by laying out the colors differently, and most notably, it has a huge black spider on its chest. Ben Reilly was eventually killed, but the costume was received so well, it was adapted for the cult favorite Spider-Girl series. At number 5 is the Miles Morales costume. Like I said earlier, I'm a sucker for black and red. Miles Morales is the current Ultimate Universe version of Spider-Man. He's a 13-year-old kid from Brooklyn who takes on the Spider-Man identity after the Ultimate Peter Parker's death. Miles discovers spider powers of his own after he was bitten by a spider 11 months before Peter's death. Side note, I know a lot of you guys have been wanting me to do a history of episode on Miles, which is in the works, so be on the lookout for that episode in the next few weeks. As for his costume, I think it's one of the more practical Spider-Man costumes in the sense that it's basically entirely black with a little bit of red webbing around his chest, head, and fingers. So since his costume is primarily black, it gives him that stealth edge so he can lurk in the shadows like Batman. But even besides that, I just dig the costume. At number 5 is Spider-Man 2099. Spider-Man 2099 is just one of my favorite Spider-Man characters in general. In the year 2099, Miguel O'Hara's boss secretly got him addicted to a drug. Miguel tried to cure himself, but of course the experiment went wrong, and he was granted spider-like powers. Not only does this futuristic Spider-Man have different powers from the original webhead, like organic webbing and retractable talons, but his costume is a huge departure from good old Peter Parker's as well. Besides just using the same colors, red and blue, everything else is different. Miguel's costume was originally just a modified Day of the Dead costume he had in his closet. I really like the solid blue color with the red spider-like skull on his chest and his mask. I also really like the gauntlets on his arms, and of course, his webbing cape, which just makes his poses in the comics look more dynamic and appealing. Making its way into my top 3 is the Scarlet Spider hoodie costume. Ben Reilly, the clone of Peter Parker, who I mentioned in my number 6 pick, was the first Scarlet Spider before he briefly took over the Spider-Man mantle. The Scarlet Spider costume was meant to be somewhat ridiculous, as it was homemade by Reilly out of a hoodie. It was a subtle way to communicate to the readers the character's outcast status, but even though it wasn't meant to be a hit, the costume and the character have gained a huge following among Spider-Man fans, me being one of them. Talking purely about his costume though, I just really like the blue hoodie. Why exactly? I don't know. I just think it looks cool. Plus, I've always liked the pouches on his ankles and the shape of his eyes, like how the lines of his eyes are sharp and dynamic and not so rounded all the time, at least in most artists' interpretations. So even though the costume is very 90s and wasn't necessarily meant to be a hit, it's still one of my all-time favorites. Coming in second is the Iron Spider costume. This is definitely one of the sleekest and best looking costumes Spider-Man has ever had, in my opinion, hence it coming in second. The Iron Spider suit was a gift from Iron Man given to Peter Parker during the Civil War storyline. Tony Stark gave it to Spider-Man to enhance Spider-Man's powers and abilities. There are two things that stand out when looking at this costume: the yellow and red color scheme, which makes sense because Iron Man is the one who made it, but even more awesome is the mechanical arms it has. The second is that the Superior Spider-Man costume has similar arms like this as well, but that's only because it was modeled after this suit. The metallic look it has is just BA, I think, and the way the yellow/gold segments make up the spider across his chest is just genius. So not only does this suit enhance Spider-Man's powers and abilities, but it looks great. And coming in at number 1, which I'm sure lots of you may have guessed by now since I haven't mentioned it on my list yet, is black costume Spider-Man. Besides Spider-Man's classic red and blue spandex, it's definitely next in line as far as iconic and fan loved is concerned. Which is for good reason, because it's one of the coolest costumes in comics, period. In my humble opinion, of course, and was originally an alien symbiote that later became Venom. Later, however, Black Cat made Spider-Man a non-living duplicate, as she said it was sexier than his red and blue suit. The two suits were used interchangeably initially, but the black suit eventually became Spider-Man's primary suit after his red and blue suit was destroyed. However, after Venom attacked his wife Mary Jane, she forced Peter to abandon this suit for good. So from then on out, he only occasionally wore the black suit. Essentially, whenever the writers want Peter to be wearing the black suit, he'll wear the black suit. But yes, this costume is by far my favorite Spider-Man costume, minus his classic costume, but even still, I may like this one a tad more. I'm not sure. Anyway, this is just my list of favorite Spider-Man costumes, but I'm curious to see what your list is. So leave your list down in the comment section below. When you buy a domain name from domain.com, you get the power to influence and control what people find when they search for you online. No domain extension will help you tell your story like a .com or .net domain name. Domain.com is affordable, reliable, and easy to use. The guys at domain.com gave variants an awesome offer. Get 15% off domain.com's already affordable domain names and web hosting when you use their coupon code variants at checkout. So when you think domain names, think domain.com. First up for Wednesday, November 19th, we have Amazing Spider-Man issue 10. In this issue, we get the Superior Spider-Man. Need I say more? Now we have Harley Quinn issue 12. Harley's over the moon about teaming up with the all-powerful Power Girl, but it won't take X-ray vision for Power Girl to see that something's not right with her new best bud. Here we have Superman and Wonder Woman issue 13. In this issue, the unity between Superman and Wonder Woman will be tested as never before, as a mysterious group of villains make their debut in the New 52. And finally, we have Batman Superman issue 16. An unseen terror launches deadly strikes against major cities, and the only clue is kryptonite. Well, that brings another episode of Variant to a close, but remember, you can always like our Variant Facebook page to keep up with the show in all things comic related. Also, if you guys want to be involved with some comic conversation and even be on the show from week to week, like the videos I'm about to show, look at the directions in the description below or watch the End of My History of Big Hero 6 episode where I explain it in depth. As for the question I asked last week on my Twitter account, it was, what are your thoughts on Margot Robbie being cast as Harley Quinn in the Suicide Squad film? Let's see what you guys had to say, but I'll see you guys next week when I talk about all things comics.
I think that casting Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn is a pretty interesting decision because I think she kind of looks like her too, and I've never seen any of her movies, but I'm very curious to see how she brings out that character.
I think she's the movie's best casting choice so far. She's got the perfect look for her, and I hope she nails it.
I think she will make a basic Harley Quinn if she could pull off insanity.
She's much better looking than Arlene Sorkin.
I don't really know what to think. I've never seen her before in TV or anything, but she looks like Harley and I'm keeping my mind open.
How do I feel about Margot Robbie being Harley Quinn?
I'm really happy to hear that, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.